Hi everyone! Today I would like to show you my second project for the Rubber Dance blog, where I have used and combined some of their beautiful stamp and stencil designs. Off camera I have already stamped, colored and fussy cut mushrooms from the textured mushroom stamp set, and I will show them real soon. But now I wanted to add some foliage, and for that I was going to use this beautiful stencil called Sketchy Leaves number 1. And since I colored the mushroom using alcohol markers, I decided to color my leaves in the same style so they would match better. And since, as I said, I was planning to use alcohol markers, the paper that I used for this is alcohol marker pad. Anyway, here is the first leaf. I accidentally forgot to record how I made it, so I will show you full process on my second one. Now, the first step was just to place my stencil and color in the area using the brightest shade of green. In case that you're not familiar, the alcohol markers that I'm using are Spectrum Noir 3-blend markers. In one same marker you have 3 shades of same color, which is really practical for beginners because it really saves you trouble thinking and figuring out which shades blend nice. But of course, for this project any kind of alcohol markers would have worked perfectly as well. Now that I have the basic shaped colored, I will bring the inside part of the stencil and bring out the darkest shade in my marker to color in these little details inside the leaves. Now that that is done, I will take the inside part out and try to blend in the colors using some mid-tones from the same alcohol marker. Of course, if you don't like working with alcohol markers, any other medium like acrylics or even watercolors would have worked perfectly. The reason why I chose to work with the alcohol marker is that I have colored my textured mushrooms maybe a week ago, before I even had a plan what kind of art journal page I want. But when I started to plan my layout, I felt like I missed something and I thought these leaves would fit really nicely. But then again, I thought it would be weird if the leaves are colored with watercolors and the mushrooms with alcohol markers, so I decided to try this technique, which honestly I have never done before, to use alcohol markers with stencil. The next step was to frame in my leaves, and for that I'm going to use Pigma Micron pen. I wasn't trying to follow lines too much, just to look a bit more sketchy. The next step, in order to make my leaves match the mushroom, was to give them some more interest and texture. And for that I was going to use one of my perhaps even favorite stamp set from Rubber Dance, called Mixed Media Marks number 1. I won't stamp on all of the leaves, and I will leave some of them free, but I will try also to use a couple of different patterns, just for fun. Okay, so now I will fussy cut the leaves, and now here you can see how it all looks together. And I think all these elements just look like they all belong together. Anyway, as you can see, I am using white Posca pen to add some highlights, and with that my elements are ready. Okay, so next step is to start working on my background, and for that I decided to use Distress Oxide sprays. The first color that I'm using right here is called Mermaid Lagoon. The next one is called Salvaged Patina, and for the last one is Speckled Egg. Now I will use the heat gun to dry my background before I move on to the next step. And for the next step I decided to use Rainbow's number 2 stencil from Rubber Dance. Now with this I wanted to do the ink lift technique. For that I needed some clear water, which I am going to spray through the stenciled pattern. This technique generally gives very subtle result, but in my case this was just going to be the first step in whole this background creating process. On my left bottom corner you can see the effect of this the best, even though it is very subtle. The next step was some simple stenciling using Distress Oxide inks. In the most up portion of my page I will use a shaded lilac Distress Oxide. I think it gives a really pretty result. Now on the middle section of the paper I will use cracked pistachio Distress Oxide. I think this color gave a very subtle effect, but in this case I was fine with that. And now for the lowest section I will reach for one of the darker blue shades called Chipped Sapphire. This way, with both my Distress Oxide sprays and ink pads, I achieved a little bit of an ombre effect, going with the darker shades toward the bottom of my page and brighter shades towards the upper section. Okay, so I was really in a mood to add some more interest to my background, so I decided to add some heat embossing patterns. For this I will use the same stamp set that I used before, Mixed Media Marks number 1. Now one thing that I didn't even know it's possible, I probably used too much powder from the powder pillow that you saw me using before. So my stamping was, how to say this? It ended up very discreet even though that I used a white embossing powder. But I guess I was fine with that result. I didn't want it to be too bold anyway. Here you can see that the embossing powder is not catching too much. But it's fine, honestly. Okay, here you can see my very discreet heat embossing was done. But now while this beautiful stamp was in my hand, I decided to do some more ink lift technique by spraying clear water on my stamp and pulling the Distress Oxide ink with it. I think this is a really beautiful effect, and I will repeat it on a couple of places on my background. Just be aware this technique is not possible to achieve with any kind of inks, but in general Distress Oxide inks, which are hybrid inks, or any kind of dye inks usually work good. And now after stamping with water and heat embossing stamping comes a little bit of regular stamping as well. Of course, for me it was inevitable to add a couple of splatters as well, this time in black color using Winsor & Newton Black India ink. But of course, you know, there are options like black gesso, black acrylic paint, black watercolor, whatever you have. As a last step for my background, I am just darkening the edges of the lower portion of the paper using Black Soot Distress Oxide ink. And now finally comes the time to assemble my layout. I already had a kind of an idea, so I will very soon start with adhering, sometimes using the foam tape and sometimes using liquid glue. The foam tape that I'm using is a really thin one, actually the thinnest one I could find on the market, because while I still did want some dimension, I didn't want too much because of the album in which I will adhere this page. Anyway, in next 1 or 2 minutes I will speed forward and you can see how I am assembling my layout. Okay, so this is the basic layout. Now I wanted to adhere a sentiment. This one is from Tim Holt's Ideology collection. It's quote chips. They are a bit thick, so as you can see I will kind of split them, tear off the back side, because as I mentioned not long ago, I didn't want too much dimension on my page, as I will later on adhere it to my album. Now, as I adhered my butterfly, I'm drawing back the tentacles using Pigma Micron pen. The next step is to adhere my quote using liquid glue. And now, as the last step, I will adhere my page to this album that I have. I have already placed the double-sided tape on the back of the page, as you will see soon. So I will just remove the backing and adhere my page. And that's about it for this project. I have really enjoyed creating it. It was really fun working with these rubber band stamps and stencils. And of course, I hope you enjoyed my process as well. If you wish to read more about this project, you can check out Rubber Dance blog. Thank you so much for being with me today, and have a nice crafty day. Bye!